Seems like everybody's talking about narcissism lately, but behind that word, it seems like there's something older. It's that feeling of not being seen or seen for who you really are. I don't want to talk about blame today, but we're going to talk about narcissism with Kyle. I want to talk about that fog we grow up in and what it takes to come back to yourself and what that means for the next generation. Kyle Miller has walked that path, and so have I. And this is a really hard conversation for me. I'm going to try to speak from the scar and not from the wound, but that wound is like right there. So, welcome, Kyle.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited about this.
So, you're a narcissistic coach? No, not narcissistic coach, a coach who helps deal with the wounds that a narcissist leaves behind.
Yep. Yep, that's pretty accurate. Narcissistic abuse recovery coach, or lots of different names and branding in there. I think really what I actually do is I'm a personal empowerment coach, because what we really lose is ourselves and our own autonomy and empowerment and all of those things in these relationships. And so when it really comes down to it, what I really do is help bring you back into yourself and take the power back in your own life, in yourself, and be able to then move forward and build and live a life that you really love.
I'd like to unpack a lot of that throughout this conversation. But first, I want to start with, why does it seem like everybody gets labeled a narcissist today?
Well, it's a buzzword for sure. Everybody wants to use it. Everybody's upset about the way that people are treating them or saying, things to them. So it gets thrown out there a lot. And there's a lot of misunderstanding in it. And I think, a lot of that is, rightfully so. A lot of people with hurt feelings, with, misunderstandings that are not being treated well. And a lot of that is legitimate. I do not think that all of those people are narcissists. And that's where it becomes a little bit more complicated. And I'm a coach, so I'm not a therapist. I'm not diagnosing, all of those things. But the way that I look at it is there's a whole bunch of different tendencies that we look at that are narcissistic tendencies. So the abuse, the manipulation, the gaslighting, vindictiveness, lots of different things. And there are a lot of those things which from the outside, they look like narcissism. And they are, in fact, coming from different places. So perhaps somebody with CPTSD or codependency or ADHD, insecure attachment. There are lots of different things where they kind of all overlap a lot with what the tendencies look like from the outside, but they're driven from a different place. And so when I think about, someone that could possibly, maybe, potentially be narcissistic, I look at, they have a bunch of those different tendencies, along with they don't have accountability, they don't have empathy, and they don't have compassion. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of unhealthy tendencies, but also have accountability and empathy and compassion. I mean, they're a caring person. They just kind of are a little reactive in not healthy ways. And that's kind of a differentiator that I look at when I think about it.
Those tendencies you were describing, the CTPSD, ADHD, that all feels like, not that I have all of those, but that can feel like you're born into a fog and you don't know how to see out of that. How do you, what is, and even before you're even aware to come to Kyle Miller and say, hey, how do I recover from this? How do you even see outside of, how do you crack that fog? Like, what do you do there?
I think it's one of the hardest things. Awareness is really hard for all of us, including myself. I'm pretty aware, and I'm completely unaware of whatever things, because I'm in the jar, and it's the same for all of us in our lives. We're in the jar. So we can't see in the jar because we're in the jar. It's like the fish swimming, when I ask the other fish, how's the water? And they're like, what's water? We're all in it. We're in our lives. We're in ourselves. And so it's very hard for us to see in and to gain that awareness. And it's not something that we're ever taught. I think that a lot of it, with hopefully having some supportive friends or family or acquaintances, anyone else in our lives, that helps a lot. But I think just the fact that you just feel like something is not quite right. That's a big step of going, something, I don't know what's wrong. Something is not quite right in my life or with me, or, things that are going on. And then, looking for an outside perspective, which is hard for us because there's all kinds of shame and judgment in that, especially for men. That's, even worse for guys, in my opinion.
Why, especially for men?
Because men are raised that we have to be tough. We, I'll give you something to cry about. All of those things. Don't show your emotions. We don't want to see that. You need to be tough. You need to be manly. You need to be strong. We don't have time for the emotions. And in some places, it's that is for anybody that's in the heat of battle of whatever variety that may be. We don't have time for the emotions in a lot of ways in those moments. Whether or not it's, if we're looking at, military or police or firefighter, any of those situations, nope, we need to turn all that off and we need to go get the job done so that we all make it out alive. And so I can understand in a lot of different areas, if we're in a fight, a physical fight of some sort, we don't have any time for any emotions. But aside from that, and after that, and before that, those are all of the other times when we either deal with our emotions or we stuff them for however long we can and whatever we can. And it always creates more problems.
That's interesting. I don't even know that I had emotions. I don't know that I would have even been able to name them. And I'm thinking back to Brené Brown's work. She says that you need to be able to name 30 emotions to be emotionally literate. And I could have named like anger and sadness. And I don't know, but I was never given those tools to even go to look inside and go, let alone to have a fine-grained approach to what an emotion is, but to even know that those emotions are coming from inside and what they are. So a lot of the times I would either come out as sadness and I would cry and be embarrassed by that, or anger and I would be ashamed of that anger.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, society reinforces all of those things, the kids all through school reinforce all of it, teachers, parents, there's just, we're literally programmed because actually as little boys, they're actually pretty emotional, but it is really trained and programmed and beaten out of us. And, toughen up, get back up, get back up. You fall off the bike, you're crying, get back up. Come on, get back on it. Toughen up, dry those tears. All of those things that we hear. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen with women, but it certainly happens much more with most men.
And what's the cost of that if men don't ever acknowledge their emotions?
Self-destruction and implosion and explosion. Depending on who we are, how we are in our lives, it's either self-destruction and implosion or explosion on everyone else. It's massive and it's horrific and it just never ends up well. So it's either however many different diseases or, looking at the, how many men alive themselves every single day. And, or they, on the other side where, okay, they do really well, stuff all the emotions, they go and conquer, they build the business, they do all the things, and then their life falls apart, lose the marriage, lose the kids, lose everything in their life. And then, probably end up with different chronic illnesses that they can't figure out where is this coming from? I don't understand how I got all of this. I eat well and I have money and I take care of myself, but you never take care of the emotional, all of the mental and emotional stuff. And if we don't take care of that, there's all kinds of, and I'm not a doctor, all of those things, right? But there's too many little coincidences and too many things that, that seem to line up pretty well with the fact that we haven't addressed or dealt with or sat with our emotions.
I imagine that opens us up quite nicely to a narcissistic abuse if we can't name our emotions. or even know what's happening to us. Those wounds are wide open and right there for somebody to jam their finger in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're used to, if our normal is, you know, no, toughen up, like dry the tears. I don't want to hear about it. All of those things. I mean, that leads us right in. Boy, that's perfect. Because that's what they're going to say to us. They're going to be super sweet and nice and wonderful and all the things and, love bomb us and suck us all in. And then at a certain point, it's going to change. And then they're going to be like, why are you being so emotional about this? Which is it's the
You're
same
so
thing that we were
sensitive.
raised. Yeah. Why are you so sensitive? It's the same thing that we grew up with. We were programmed. We were trained with. It was beaten into us. And so, of course, we're going to find somebody that's not healthy.
We're going to find that So what's the pattern that keeps us coming back to those who wound us?
It's normal. It's normal for us. Especially, when we've gone through abuse, especially, it is normal for us to be in the abuse, to experience the abuse. All of that stuff feels normal. Peace, that doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel safe. Somebody that just genuinely cares about you and just loves you for you, that supports you, that is there for you, that feels incredibly uncomfortable, So those are the things for me now. Those experiences when I have the connection with somebody that just really cares. They just really care and they show it and they show up for me and they encourage me and support me. Those are the things that break me down now. Because I'm still working, I'm in a really good place, best place that I've ever been in my life. But sometimes that level of support and love and peace and comfort is still uncomfortable for me to fully embrace all the time. And it just breaks you down.
For myself, like the difference between my marriage and the relationship I'm in today, we've been together almost 13 years at this point, and she would say something that was, like you're saying, supportive, and I wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't believe it. Like that was scarier to me than being in that abusive relationship. Is there a desire to fix the other person that we're trying to scratch that itch? Like we're trying to relive that pattern?
I think there definitely is some of that. I don't think that it's all of it. I think a lot of times it's not necessarily, I think more often it's not to fix the other person. It's how can I show up in a way? I mean, it's people pleasing or many other things from us. How can I show up in a different way or do things different in order to get this person to love me? Because if they can love me, then maybe I'll be enough. Maybe then I wasn't as bad as what all of those other people said or the way that they treated me. Maybe if I can change myself or do something in order to get this person to love me, then it will heal all of the childhood wounds and the child inside of me. I think that's what it most often, and certainly there's some aspect of us wanting to save them and take care of them, but I think a lot of it comes back to, if I can make this right, then maybe I'll be enough and maybe I'll be loved.
So let's say you start developing this awareness and you go, well, like you were saying, it's hard to crack that fog. Well, let's say you see a sliver of it. By the way, I think my crack was taking psychedelics for the first time. I took mushrooms and it was like, oh, I see outside of this. Interesting. I don't have to live in this fog, or there's a way out of this fog. So let's say they start to see outside of that fog. How do they recognize that it's narcissism? I know you mentioned a few traits: not taking accountability, maybe pushing your buttons. Like, how does one of your clients find your way to you specifically as a narcissistic recovery coach?
I think, most of the people, they find me online because they're searching for answers. And, we gain a little crack, a little crack in the illusion that we've lived in. And so then we go looking for answers. And so that's usually when they come across my content or other people, doing similar things. And they're just looking for answers. They don't know, it's the same thing with myself. I didn't know what the issue was. I was in a very fortunate place because I've studied personal development now for almost 20 years. And so I didn't know what to do, except I knew what to do. what I do is I go start researching everything, every single podcast, every single YouTube video, what's going on here, and that's really how most people lead into that. And I think to touch on the point of, are they a narcissist or not? So many of us, we want to find out, because if they're a narcissist, then maybe there's no hope. But if they aren't a narcissist, then maybe there is hope, because we need to justify to ourselves, and we need to have enough reason to justify to everyone else, to society, to all of those other outside things, that this is bad enough in order for us to do something about it, or to leave the relationship, or any of those things. And if you're to the point where you're searching to find out what is going on in your relationship, it's probably bad enough. If you can't have a conversation with your partner about what's going on without leaving the conversation wondering how everything is your fault, even though they clearly articulated everything was your fault. I mean, it was plain as day the way they explained it, even though it still didn't make any sense to you why everything was your fault. I mean, that wasn't what you started the conversation with, but it sure ended that way. And you're still questioning yourself and your reality and what's going on. If there's any type of situation like that, and then you're going to outside resources, videos, posts, whatever it is, to figure out what's going on, that is a really bad sign of a very unhealthy relationship. And it doesn't matter if they're a narcissist or not, because the relationship is unhealthy.
There was a really short story. When I was going through the divorce, I went over to my ex's place and we were talking, and she goes, "We ended up here because you did this, you did that, you did this, you did that." And I got really angry at her because there was no accountability, and like it was all my fault. And then we started yelling at each other, and she went, "I'm trying to apologize to you." There was no accountability in it though. So I think if you're ending up in that sort of place where you're having those circular arguments, it's just better to walk away. You're not going to ever make any progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to touch on that a little bit, I know there's a lot of people that are not in the position where they can. And so no shame, no judgment, wherever you are starting from, find support, find help. Even if you can't leave, there are people out there that are willing and ready to support you. You just have to decide that you are ready to have someone else help you through this.
I would acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage and determination to make your way out of it. Like, courage to leave that pattern, holy shit. Like, it's that to look at yourself in that way, that you are, to even acknowledge that you might be being abused and to start to break those patterns. It is a scary place to be. And we were talking before we could record, and you said something to the effect that learning to deal with the narcissist, that's just step one. And then the real work begins of like looking under the surface and finding out how you ended up there.
Yeah. Yeah, I really believe that for most all of us that have been in the relationship with a narcissist, that is the surface level symptom of everything else that has gone on in our life that has led us to that point where we were able, or unable to not get into the relationship, but, led us into the relationship with them. And so we work through all the stuff with the narcissist and the abuse and the grief and all of those things that come along with that. And then the real work begins, and we then work on all of the things that led us up to that point.
So speaking of the things that led us up to that point, somebody told me once that your soul chooses the path. And this is the spiritual kind of view of this.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that helpful when it comes to narcissistic abuse, or is that a spiritual bypass, or making excuses, or blaming yourself?
I think that any and all of those things can be helpful. I think any way, and what I say, a lot of people will say, well, everything happens for a reason. And I believe that's a bunch of shit. I think that we can make meaning out of everything that happens. I cannot begin to believe that everything happens for a reason. Now maybe, cosmically or spiritually or however you want to look at it. Okay, maybe we did sign up for that. I don't know. But what I do know is that any and all of those things can be helpful, with the major caveat of, as long as we are not using them to shame and blame and judge ourselves, using them to pick up that stick and beat ourselves with. You chose this was your path, and so this is all your fault. And all of those things, which, we're already getting from society and whoever else, definitely from the narcissist, if we have one of those. So adding to that is never helpful. We cannot beat ourselves into healing or feeling better or loving ourselves. That is only something we can allow ourselves to do.
I think for me, it was helpful I think I thought of it that way in order to have some sort of, to reclaim that sense of power of, let's say I chose this. Let's just assume that why did I choose this? And what am I looking to get out of it? And how do I learn that lesson as quick as possible so that I don't have to stay here too long?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I think all of those things are helpful, just as long as we're not using it to shame and blame and judge ourselves. And it's a lot easier in retrospect to look back at things and go, okay. There's so many things that I've gone through in my life. I'm like, that was awful, but I'm so glad that I went through that, because I would not have gained the awareness of, hey, there's more. By the way, there's more. But wait, there's more work that I need to do on myself. There are more things that I didn't realize were issues until I was in that relationship, in that situation. And those are helpful, even though they hurt.
How do you deal with that hurt? And I find anger is the second emotion on top of that hurt. And I know I still care. I've done, you said you did 20 years. I've done about 20 years on myself. And I know I still carry it with me some days. Like, there's some days where I'm just like, I can't believe that you hurt me like this. Like, I've told you. And it especially flares up when I see what it costs me. How do you handle that sadness and that secondary emotion of anger on a day-to-day basis?
I think the biggest thing, the way that I think about emotions, our thoughts and our emotions, the way that I think about them is the way that I think about a healthy parent dealing with their child, like a toddler. And, the toddler's out playing, they're doing whatever, they get hurt, something happens, then they come to their parent and they're upset, they're crying, they're angry, whatever it is that they're feeling. And the healthy parent acknowledges that there's a problem. Something happened. We don't know what happened. Something happened. There was an injury of some sort, physically, mentally, emotionally. And they acknowledge that their child has had something happen. They might pull them up on their lap, give them a hug. They don't try to fix them. They don't shame them. They don't judge them. They don't tell them that they're wrong. They don't try to do anything other than be there and support and love their child while their child goes through that emotional experience that they go through. And in that situation, the child goes through that, roller coaster of emotions. And then a minute, two later, they're like, okay, I'm going to go play again. And they run off and play happy as can be. And we don't do that with ourselves, with our emotions. Oh, that's wrong. I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't think that. I shouldn't, all of those things that we do to ourselves to judge and shame ourselves. And it takes so much work and so much awareness to bring us to the point where we are able to just allow that emotion to come up and allow ourselves to sit in it and acknowledge, oh, okay, yep, super angry right now, or super sad, or whatever the emotion is, and simply allow it to be there and know that nothing has gone wrong. Everything is okay. We're just experiencing emotions. And sometimes for some people, it's helpful for them to go out. I need to go break something. I need to physically get this out. I don't think there's any wrong way to do it aside from causing harm to anyone else. And so whatever way you need to, if you need to go scream, if you need to cry, if you need to break something, I don't think that there is any negative way to do that aside from harming someone else. But I think the acknowledgement of that emotion and just allowing it to just be there, because that's what the healthy parent does. And what allowing the emotion to be there feels like is, it feels like a really good friend that gives you a hug. And when they wrap their arms around you, you have to allow them to hug you. You know, we've all hugged somebody, I'm sure, at some point, where you lean in to hug them and they kind of retract, and they won't quite let you hug them and embrace them. And this is one of those things where we have to allow that hug. And the same for them. We allow each other to hug each other and sink into that embrace. And that's what it feels like with the emotions. Even though, especially with hard emotions, it feels awful. It's like, okay, now I'm gonna hug this and I'm gonna just allow it to be there. That feels awful. And it's hard. And it's practice. It is a process and a practice more than it is ever an end result.
Yeah. Yeah. And one that lasts the rest of your life. I know we talked about not recognizing emotions and the cost of that. What's the cost of never healing from a narcissist, especially as men, especially as fathers?
It costs everything, I think, honestly, as much as I really hate to say that. I think it costs every single relationship in our lives. It costs careers. It costs, jobs, businesses, new relationships. It costs our health. It literally costs everything. And that's hard to say. It's hard to say that because I realize that's, and I don't say this in a way to, to bring shame or judgment. I mean, we've all got enough of that. We don't need any more of that. And so, I say this with love to everyone because it is the, I think, single line that you can draw in your life that heads you down a path of good and improvement and all of the things that you want in your life, or it leads you down a path of destruction in whatever ways, whether or not we're consciously aware of what that destruction is. And I think on the other side, to look at the other side of this, if you start doing the work for yourself, it will affect every single person in your life. Every single person, whether or not you ever say a single word to them or not, you will positively affect every single person in your life. Everything in your life will be affected for the better doing this work for yourself.
For me, I think through my divorce, I carried a lot of anger through it, and I saw the cost if I didn't heal it to my kids. Do you have kids?
I raised 2 stepdaughters.
I saw how it impacted my kids and how they carried their own anger forward. And I realized if I did not do something like drastic, I noticed it even before my divorce. I realized if I didn't do something drastic, that they were going to just repeat that same pattern. I almost believe that if you're raised by a narcissist, or if you have a narcissist in your life, you are going to carry those wounds forward. And it's almost like a virus in that you just give it to the next person, give it to the next person, give it to the next person. You do that and it affects the next generation until somebody decides to do something about it. And I just couldn't pass that down any further.
I agree.
So that was my motivation.
Yeah. It's a really big deal. I think one of the commitments that I made as I was getting divorced, I decided that I was just going to love everyone that much more. I knew that I could be angry, I could be bitter, I could be self-destructive, and I was, and I had every right to feel all of those things that I felt. And I was also still going to choose to just simply love everyone more and to do the work in order to be able to embrace that love from anyone else, everyone else, but to give them that much more. And it was life altering because I know that I could have gone down a darker path. I mean, not that I did go down a dark path already anyway, but I could have gone down a darker path than I did. And I'm grateful for, I don't know how that came about, but I'm grateful for that. And I realize that it takes a lot to get there. One of the things that you had mentioned earlier was how hard and how much courage and everything it takes to get out of these relationships. And I think that the thing that we don't realize is that it doesn't take any more to get out of it than it does to stay in it. It feels like it's more miserable, but it ends. And when we stay in it, we stay in that same level of misery, and it continues to get worse. And so it literally does not take any more from us to get out and to heal and to move forward with our lives than it does to stay in it.
So we have that meme of go to the gym or, put on weight. Both ways are hard, but you get to choose your hard. And I have a friend who's 20 years into the same type of marriage I had been into. And his life is much rougher than mine. So some of us maybe were raised in that environment, and you fight your whole life. You fight for love, you fight for even to breathe, you fight for peace. And there's just, as you come out of it, there's like this dog tiredness, like this tiredness that just goes right into your bone. And I know for myself, I really want to leave my mark on the world, especially now that I'm, surfacing on this, but my God, I don't have that fight in me. How do you move forward when you've been in that fight mode most of your life?
I think there's so much exhaustion. I mean, so many levels and layers of exhaustion that we usually end up shaming and beating ourselves up for. I'm being lazy, of course, and that's not true. That's not accurate. It takes a tremendous amount of rest. We need, this is not a good night's sleep. This is like deep rest for our soul that we need in order to recover from this, because we've been so neglected, so abused, just so beaten up that it takes a tremendous amount of rest in order for us to then kind of be in the position where we're not just exhausted all the time. And it doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't seem like it makes sense. And I think that's one of the biggest aspects. There's times when I just have to sleep extra a lot sometimes. And I know that's one of the biggest places where we heal, where we recover, is through that rest. And it doesn't help the society as well. You're being lazy if you're doing that. And it's just not true. We need a tremendous amount of rest in order to really work through and heal and recover from these relationships. And it could be years. And so I think the rest aspect is a huge part of being able to, because if we don't ever fully charge our batteries, then it's really hard for us to go conquer, to go do whatever other things. And I don't know what the balance is. I know for myself, there's been a lot of time when I have needed to rest and I've needed to, just take time and kind of, I don't want to say contemplate my life or myself or whatever, but in some ways kind of that, a lot of journaling. But I also know that there is a certain point where you need a little push. I've noticed, especially with me building my business, there are times when I can wait around and try to get those emotions or whatever to show up so I can work through them, or I can just push myself a little bit, go to work, and then boy, here they all come. But there's no, I don't think there's a way to tell, oh, when you're in this situation, then you do this. It's very individual. And that's what makes so much of all of this so hard. A lot of people that sell courses and programs and different things, they want to be able to put this into a 5-step or a 10-step or a 20-step, and it is just so different for everyone because we're all individuals. So I hope that's helpful. I think that the biggest thing is being kind to ourselves no matter what. And when we beat ourselves up, because boy will we, then also being kind to yourself through that process. It's like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. We're not going to say no. That's enough. Just like we would with a kid, whoa, hey dude, you're throwing fifths, fists, you're throwing a fit, whatever's going on. Nope, that's enough. That's enough. And we have to do that same type of thing with ourselves as well.
And I completely agree with you. I would argue that being kind to yourself also involves some sort of exercise, eating good food. You mentioned journaling. I like to sit with a cigar and stare off into a fire, like any of those sort of things where you get back to yourself. And it always seems that the simplest thing is usually the antidote to that feeling.
We want something profound. What's the 3 steps to healing? It's sitting every day and journaling, sitting with yourself. When you feel that emotion come up, you go, that feels awful. I really don't want to feel that right now. And just sitting in it. And maybe you still push it away, maybe you still run away from it, avoid it, distract yourself, but you let a little bit of it come up. And then maybe the next day you can let a little bit more. Maybe the next day you can be a little bit kinder to yourself. Maybe you were throwing all the swear words and everything at yourself the day before, and maybe you only threw a few at you the next day or the next week. It's all little baby steps of progress. And we don't realize how far we have come until we look back and go, okay, because it doesn't feel, it feels like I'm not going anywhere here. Or we get ourselves to a place of peace and then everything goes out the window and it's like, what happened here? Like I was feeling so good and then everything feels like it went sideways. That's part of it's a roller coaster through the whole healing process. And a lot of it, I think, is when we've calmed everything down in our nervous system, in our life and everything, then we can hear all of that stuff that's below the surface. We couldn't hear before because there was all of the other chaos going on. And so when we hear that, we think, oh, well, everything has gone sideways and everything went wrong because I was feeling good and then I gained just a little tiny bit of awareness and then everything feels awful now. But that's the process. That's actually what it looks like. And we go through those cycles of that roller coaster.
Let's try and speak from the scar then. And maybe this is one of those things that never fully heals, but you just kind of decide that that's enough. And you just keep coming back and trying to heal that scar, heal the wound.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like from the other side of narcissism? And I don't mean healed because I don't know that you ever get there, but you described it, I think, as a return back to yourself. What does that look like?
For me right now, what a lot of it looks like is nothing's a big deal in my life. There's no stress. There's no problems. I have things blow up in my business or in my life or different things that go on. And I don't have the shame and the judgment attached to them. So all of the things that I could be beating myself up for, I just don't. I observe them, I recognize, oh, okay, well, there is a problem there that I need to work through. Okay. But there's not that inner voice that's like, oh, you were so stupid and you did all of this and you messed that up and you shouldn't have said that thing and you shouldn't have done, those things, all of that extra stuff that we normally add on, especially if we've gone through this. And I did for most all of my life. And on the other side, most everything is just not a big deal. And it doesn't mean that you push aside all of the way that you feel. It's like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious right now. I feel like I shouldn't have said that thing to this person. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And you kind of watch it more like a movie. There's lots of thoughts in there. Okay, yeah, that's all okay. And so because when we have removed the shame and the judgment from all of the things from our past, we simply had experiences that we went through. There's not all of the emotional weight that we carry with it. And I think one of the things that people say, time heals all wounds. And I disagree with that. What time does is it gives us enough distance from those emotions that it takes the charge out of those emotions, or it can take some of the charge out of those emotions. And it's very hard for us to let go of the emotions if they're still supercharged. When we are really angry, it is really hard for us to just flip the switch and just not be angry anymore. Now, sometimes something will happen, something funny or something unexpected or something will happen and it will knock the charge out of that emotion. But most of the time, if we're really angry or we're really sad, it's really hard because that emotion is charged. And so we can't let go of it. And so the time gives us enough distance from the situation, whatever happened, that it takes a lot of the charge out of that emotion, which makes it easier to let go of. But if we don't do the work, then the only things that we actually let go of are ones that we did accidentally. And I think that's what a lot of people, I'm feeling much better about this situation, this thing that happened, whatever it was. And I think a lot of that, this space and the time, took a lot of the charge out of the emotion, and they were able to let go of some of those things. But they didn't do it consciously for a lot of them. And no shame, no judgment. I mean, anything we can let go any way that we can is positive. But the more conscious we are, the more of it we can let.
The way you're describing is that it's an experience. That's almost the spiritual approach. It's an experience, not a indictment of who you are.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed of the person that I used to be. Not, in a negative way, but I am a very different person than I was, even a year ago, 2 years ago. And that's the way that it should be. But I don't have the shame and the judgment on that. Wow. Okay. I learned a whole lot of new different things. And I learned how to love me more no matter what.
One thing that got rid of the shame for me, and I'm the same way. I've got a picture from about 15 years ago, and you would not recognize me. And the thing, I still get into that shame spiral every now and then. But what I tell myself is that I did what I had to do to survive that moment. I did not have any better tools at that time. I have them now. I didn't have them then, or I have more tools now. I don't have all the tools, but. And often,
yeah, I agree with that very much, which is another way that we shame ourselves. Well, I know now, so I should have known then, even though I was clueless in however many ways at that point. I had no idea. I was grasping at straws trying to survive. And that's what most of these situations are, until we go, I understand now what was going on. Well, why didn't I behave that way back then? That's usually shame and judgment.
For those of us who survive those types of relationships, this really seems like such a rare skill to have gone through that relationship, those narcissistic abusive relationships, come out ahead. And by ahead, I mean you've grown from them, you've healed yourself. What is our duty moving forward?
I hesitate to put that on anyone because I think that there's too much of that already. I think that it's something that we can choose to take on for ourselves. And it's just like a lot of people think, as a life coach, of course, I'm going to tell you how to live your life. And that's probably the furthest thing from what I actually do. I think that you can choose. I would love if everyone chose to heal themselves, to break the trauma, the generational trauma, break the cycles. And I think that if you do, that in itself is world changing, because it will change your world and it will change everyone's world that you touch, and whether you say anything to them or not. And I think, I'm just thinking about this actually, that so much of what many of us have felt is that we've never been enough. We've never done enough. And I think this is perhaps one of those things. We have to do enough in order to be loved or to be worthy or deserving or any of those things. And I think doing the work to heal, you realize that you didn't need to do anything. You simply are, and you were, worthy and deserving of love and support and kindness and all of those things. And that is world changing. I mean, that's where all of the major changes, I believe, come in the whole world, is from all of us getting a little bit more of the taste of, I am enough just as I am. It doesn't mean I don't want to be better. It doesn't mean maybe I don't want to, I want to go help other people. I don't think that's something that we all need to do. I think this is a very hard road that I wouldn't send anyone down. Doing what I do, I love it so much. I love helping people. I love getting to talk with people and work with people. And I know that it's not something for everyone. And so I think, doing the work for ourselves is essential. And I think everybody should. But as to whether or not we do that for anyone else or even, desire to show up for someone else, I think it's just added pressure to us that we don't need. And surprisingly, I think with most people that I talk to, most of my clients, they want to help other people. I mean, they are genuinely the best people that I have ever had the privilege of speaking to in my whole life. They are just unbelievably good people. And most every one of them wants to help other people. But I don't think we ever need any added pressure onto that. Doing the work and healing ourselves changes the world. And I think that's enough, just as they are.
I think it's something that might call to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's okay. I'm in full support of all of that. We need all the help we can get. It's a lot of people that need a lot of support, but I don't ever want to put it on anyone because
I
it's a lot.
I go back and forth in my mind, like you go through something so hard, like what I want to know, what did you learn from it so that other people don't have to go through it. But I didn't think of it from that angle of it's hard to go through it and you might not want to help other people go through it.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's one of the beautiful things about the world is we're all so different and we all want different things. And that's great.
I always like to finish with a bit of gratitude in that vein. Since you are helping other people, I hope you don't mind this question. You've been through a difficult, you went through your own journey of narcissistic abuse. What is the one thing you're most grateful for going through in that journey?
I think probably passion. I believed for a lot of years that I didn't have any empathy or compassion for anyone else. And part of this I allowed myself to believe, and part of it was programming that was put in. And I think, recognizing that I do, a friend of mine, I said something of that sort to a friend of mine, and he said, I call BS on that. And he was the right person at the right time to say the right thing in order to just hit me like a ton of bricks and to question everything. And I think the thing that I am the most grateful for from all of that is I don't know that there is a level of compassion that I don't have for someone else after going through what I went through. I think I had empathy and compassion before, but I think that I didn't have any idea to the depth of what I have at this point in my life now. It's just, I have compassion for everyone. I mean, as hard as it is to say, but for the narcissists too, I mean, what a miserable life to live. I mean, I don't want them in my life, but I can have a little compassion for the misery that they choose to live in. I think that is the compassion piece is the thing that I'm probably the most grateful for. Because we could all use a little bit more.
It takes a lot of strength to have that compassion, especially for the narcissist.
And a lot of work to get there.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you for your time. This was, and thank you for your open-heartedness and for doing the work too.
Thank you for having me on. This was really, really excellent. Really, really great conversation. Much needed.
I'm glad you came on. So thank you for the deep conversation. So that's it. That's the path. And that's how you get out of the fog, back to the self. You're not fixed. You're maybe not healed, but you're there. And if you're carrying the wound, learn to listen to it, learn to sit with it. And if you've made it to the scar, pass on the wisdom if that calls to you. Kyle, where do other people find out about you?
You can find me KyleMillerCoaching.com and Kyle Miller Coaching on all social media. I'm on pretty much
in the show notes.
Yep, pretty much all the platforms.
All right, well, let's leave it there. Thanks again,
Thanks
Kyle.
again.